Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. If your kids are younger than that, please use the YouTube Kids app.
Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to a special feature-length episode of Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. We've got over 90 minutes of Dogman stories in this episode, including some of the best of our quarantine stories, plus a brand new tale that we're going to begin this episode with. Before we get to all that, we get to do the most fun part of the show, the part that makes the jealous haters get really angry, the part where we say thank you to you guys out there who make this show possible. And today's executive producer is none other than Dallas Caldwell. We like Dallas, majestic as a palace. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Thanks to you, all is swell. And thanks to all the other executive producers who let the rest of you watch the show with limited commercial interruptions for free. If you'd like to become a Scary Stories executive producer and help keep us online for free, just join our very affordable paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Or you can do what Dallas Caldwell did and click the join button underneath the video. Either way, you get access to over 9 hours of secret, uncensored Dogman stories way too crazy for us to ever get away reading on this channel, plus a brand new secret, uncensored story each week at peterbernard.com. Now, for the first story in our feature-length extravaganza. This is the story featured on our thumbnail. It was just sent into us the other day, and is supposed to have happened just last week. And the title of this one is You Can't Quarantine Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I hope this letter finds you well and that the restrictions have been lifted where you are. They're still pretty tight right here, although I don't want to say where that is because I don't want my neighbor finding out I was talking about her on the internet. I'm not going to use her name. Let's just call her Karen. Her problem with me is that she doesn't want me to ever leave the house. And my problem with her is that most of what she's accusing me of was not even done by me. The problem is, I know that it was done by the Dogman, but I also know how crazy that sounds. Now this lady is a widow, although she doesn't seem to be older than her late 50s or early 60s. I feel I understand why her husband couldn't take it though, because I'm pretty sure that our brief interactions have already taken years off of my life. She'll come out and scream at me when I'm driving away. Usually I don't even know what she's saying anymore, since I've learned that there's no point in even humoring her. I used to pretend to care what she was saying, but it didn't ever calm her down any. She would just go on lecturing about something else. If you apologize to her or try to make her happy, she'll just see that as a weakness and begin telling you what else she wants you to change about your life to please her. My wife sometimes tells me the horrible things that she would like to do to Karen. I let her rant as much as she wants because I'd rather she said it to me than to Karen herself. So, my wife and I have lived in this area our entire lives. We were high school sweethearts and got married in our sophomore year in college. Karen, on the other hand, just moved to our town from New York City about 4 years ago. I'm not trying to say anything bad about New York. I know that's where your show is from. I'm just saying she came from New York, moved here, and started shouting at all of us that we weren't doing anything right. And she inherited a ton of money from the husband she likely destroyed. So she has all day, every day, to be nosy and picky. Her neighbors on the other side feel the same way about her that we do. We invite them to parties, but never Karen. So, as I was saying, most of us in this area We're born here and raised here. We also, many of us, are accustomed to the local dogman that sometimes come out of the forest at night and prowl around. We have rules and procedures about going out after dark. The dogman won't usually come near if you light your backyard very brightly, so I have to say we are not afraid to be outside at night. We just keep a safe distance from the woods and keep the yard lit up until we go back inside. If you know how to do it, you can live alongside nightmare creatures like Dogman. But if you go against the rules even a little bit, you're in big trouble. The Dogman, after all, is a predator and a carnivore. It doesn't usually like to hunt humans, but if it's hungry, and if you're careless, it's willing to make an exception. Before the incident I will describe to you, I had never seen a Dogman, and the same is true for my wife. We had heard them, and we had smelled them, but we had not laid eyes on one. They come and go from our area, but not in a seasonal or predictable way. They might be around for a day or two, then disappear for months. Or they might disappear for a day or two, then come back for months. You can tell when they're nearby because of the howling, which is different from a regular wolf's howl. It's also different from a dog's howl. It's much deeper, and to me at least, way scarier sounding. Also, the dogmen will run at the house and bump it, then race away. I don't know what that behavior means. Maybe they're showing each other how brave they are by daring to hit the human's house. Or maybe they're doing it to call us outside or to intimidate us. I really don't know. I didn't even know that they ran up to the house and ran away until my father told me about a time he had seen them doing just that in the house I grew up in. Like I said, I've always been around this area, and so has the Dogman. But Karen hasn't. So when her house started getting bumped in the middle of the night, she began complaining to me the next morning each time that I was doing it and that I'd better stop. She actually accused me of banging on her house in the middle of the night to wake her up. She really did that. I'm a grown man. I have a wife and a job. I don't stand outside at 3 a.m. banging on the houses of nasty people. It's just not something I would ever consider. Of course, I told her I didn't do it. So, each time her house got bumped in the night and it woke her up, I would get an increasingly freaked out rant the next morning. I told her to call the police the next time it happened, and she told me she would. Of course, she never did. She must know that I'm not doing it. Fast forward to this year. The quarantine thing starts. Karen starts saying that not only am I banging on her house, but I'm violating quarantine to do it, and thereby placing an old, weak woman's health in jeopardy. By this point, I would not even reply to her when she spoke to me. I would act like she wasn't even there screaming. She wasn't getting the attention she craved. So, finally, one night last week at 3 a.m. when her house got bumped, she actually did call the police and accused me of violating quarantine and trespassing. The cops woke me and my wife up at nearly 4 a.m. and spoke with us for a while explaining the situation. We told them that our house also gets bumped, and we have no idea who or what is doing it, but it's certainly not us. They seemed to believe us, but asked if they could look around the property for a while. We said fine, and we led them around toward the back of the house, where it was very dark. We heard something moving all the way in the back, and one of the cops shined a flashlight back there. All four of us, me, my wife, and both cops, saw something that stopped us dead in our tracks. There, squatting down on the side of our garage and trying to hide itself in the shadows, was what looked like an immense black dog. The eyes shone brightly in the flashlight, making the thing look supernatural, if its incredible size hadn't already done that. No sooner had the light hit it when it rose to a standing position on its hind legs, coming to a height taller than our one-car garage itself. And then it bolted off into the darkness of our neighbor's backyard. It had a dog head all right, but it had a humanoid body, covered in sleek, black fur. It looked exactly like the one my father had described seeing years earlier. It was truly a life-changing moment. I knew they were real, but there was always that tiny little bit of doubt in the back of my mind. Now, I no longer can have any doubt at all. The cops yelled at us to get inside, and they ran off after the dogman. They thoughtfully woke us up again later to tell us that they didn't catch it. They said other stuff too, but I was too tired to remember any of it. Oh, right, they said they'd talk to Karen for us and try to get her to calm down. Well, whatever they said to her did not work, as now she has some kind of conspiracy theory that the cops were actually chasing our accomplice, who we hired to trespass on her property and violate the quarantine. She thinks we hired a teenager to dress up like a dog and give her an illness. She makes no sense. It's funny, my wife and I learned how to adapt to live in the same territory as the dogman, who is possibly the most vicious predator on Earth. Yet, we still have an incredible amount of trouble trying to coexist with Karen. And I think that's because Karen can't get it into her head that you can't quarantine Dogman. Don't go anywhere. We've still got over 90 minutes of Dogman coming up, and it all starts right now with this handsome devil that you all know and love. We've got 3 all-new Dogman stories for you tonight, each from a different part of the United States. We have one from Illinois near Chicago, one from a place in Indiana called Winamac, and we had a poll last night in which you guys chose our third location, which is Tennessee, right near Memphis. But first, I would like to announce that today's episode is executive produced by Fight the Dream. Fight the Dream? Like fight for the dream? Or fight the bad dream? Fight the Dream, you're a scream. We know you're nice, so it seems, because you joined the Scary Stories team. Thank you, Fight the Dream. Your donation allows us to keep this show on the internet. We really couldn't do it without you and the other executive producers. And if you guys out there would also like to become a badass Scary Stories executive producer like Fight the Dream, just do what they did, which was to click the join link under this video. You can also join our PayPal club at peterbernard.com, and either way, you get access to over 9 hours of secret, scary Dogman stories far too wild for this channel, plus a brand new secret uncensored story each week at peterbernard.com. And now let's get to what Fight the Dream donated to us to do, which is to tell you 3 all-new scary Dogman stories. This first one takes place not far from the Michigan Dogman or the Wisconsin Werewolf, yet it didn't happen in either one of those states. This one took place just outside the great city of Chicago, Illinois, fictional home of Kolchak the Night Stalker. We can't decide what to call this, so we gave it 2 titles, which are Bipedal St. Bernard Dogman or The Dogman of the Wolf Road Woods. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I see you have stories on your channel about the Dogman in Wisconsin and in Michigan. Well, right in the middle of those 2 places, if a bit to the south, is the state I live in. We aren't as well known for Dogman as those other places, but I saw and got chased by an upright walking canid in my home state of Illinois the other day, and I would like to tell you about it. First of all, I am 72 years young, and part of the way I stay young is that I go out walking every morning. I've been trying to walk places where there aren't people so that I don't have to wear one of those obnoxious face masks. The other day, I ended up strolling down a road near here known as Wolf Road. This Wolf Road I am speaking of winds through a woods which are known as the Wolf Road Woods. Now, with a name like the Wolf Road Woods, you might think this place was hours from any city and located out in the middle of nowhere. In actuality, though, the Wolf Road Woods are technically within the limits of the greater Chicago area. I don't think it's quite inside the city technically, but it's extremely close by, a half-hour drive from City Hall. I can already hear some of you grumbling that this is far too close to a large city for something like a Dogman to exist. Perhaps you're right, but I can only tell you what I saw. Remember, it was only a couple or 3 years ago when people in high-rises in Chicago were reporting seeing Mothman flying outside their windows. Illinois is a far stranger place than we're given credit for being. I feel as though I can hear others of you wondering if Wolf Road was named after a werewolf or dogman sighting, and I honestly don't know. I thought I heard it was named after a family named Wolf, but I'm not certain. In either case, a werewolf is not what I saw that morning. I saw a dogman, or at least an upright walking canine, but it in no way resembled a wolf. What do I mean by that? Well, what this creature most closely resembled was a giant, upright walking Saint Bernard. Those of you who have met Saint Bernards know they're pretty giant as it is, but I truly mean that, in this case, the Saint Bernard I saw was giant. It was nearly twice as tall as I am, and I'm just under 6 feet. When I say it was 11 or 12 feet tall, I mean from its toes to the top of its giant Saint Bernard dog head. It stood on its hind legs, which in most ways resembled the legs of any other Saint Bernard, but its front paws were held aloft like boxing gloves in front of it. Boxing gloves with big old claws at the ends of them. The coloring of the beast was just the same as the coloring of any other St. Bernard dog. Light parts and brown patches. Its eyes were goopy, and it drooled all over the place, so it was just like the average breed of the line in that sense. Its chest and shoulders were massive, however, almost creating a V shape to the body when it held itself up at its full height. Still, for a dog, it was very wide at the waist and hip. The fact that I'm using terms such as waist to describe it should make it clear how humanoid an impression the thing made when fully upright. While that certainly was the first impression, it must be stated clearly that this was something canine and something not human. I didn't sense any humanity from the beast at all. Here is what happened. I was walking and enjoying the morning sky just beginning to turn colors after night. It was cold, but I didn't care because it felt so good to be alive. Then, I inhaled some air that smelled awful, like something was rotting. Turning around, I immediately saw it behind me. It was the huge, upright St. Bernard type creature I've been describing. When our eyes met, it reared up to the maximum height it could achieve, and then it began to growl at me and behave in a most threatening manner. I was backing up before I realized I was doing that. I had my eye on the world's largest St. Bernard, and I was moonwalking away from it. It didn't stop growling, and I wasn't feeling as though tensions were easing in any way, but I didn't know what else to do except continue walking backward and trying to seem calm. The huge beast fell forward, landing on his front arms and sending a cloud of dust into my face before I could even turn around to run. I was coughing and walking as fast as I could, unable to run due to the choking from the dust in my nose and my mouth. I assumed the dogman was following me, and I ran blindly, hacking and half retching as I did so. I literally had my eyes shut when I ran into the officer, who had a surgical face mask on, and began lecturing me that I should be wearing one. I couldn't believe how calm he was being with a giant dogman running our way. Then it occurred to me, maybe the dogman wasn't following me after all. I squinted, and as well as my bleary eyes could see, the monster was no longer chasing me. But that didn't mean he wouldn't pounce out on me as soon as the officer had walked on. I went into my old man act, pretending I was lost and needing to be walked home. I just wanted to be walked out of the Wolf Road woods, that's all I wanted. So I played up the helplessness, and he fell for it hook, line, and sinker. I feel no guilt about it either, because I was absolutely convinced that dogman was indeed looking to ambush me, and I needed that officer to save my life. If you're lying in self-defense, that isn't a lie. I mean, if I told him a werewolf was following me and I needed protection, he would have told me to put on a mask and get out of his sight. I had no choice but to do what I did. It's a beautiful area to walk in, especially around dawn. But it's safer to visit the Wolf Road woods during the fully lit daylight hours. If you go there when it's dark, you risk running into the dogman of the Wolf Road woods, Indiana Dogman, or the Winamac Werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a story for you that took place quite a few years ago, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I got the sad news recently that my childhood friend we can call Bobby passed on. He and I had an amazing adventure together when we were about 14 or 15, one Indiana summer back decades ago. Bobby was the one who was with me when I encountered the monster that he and I came to call the Winamac Werewolf. Now, the first thing I have to tell you about the Winamac Werewolf is that neither Bobby nor I thought that it was, in fact, a werewolf or wolfman. It's just, we had no idea what it was, and it was more like a werewolf than anything else we could think of. But right from the very first instant, he and I both felt we were dealing with an animal, not a human, or a shapeshifter, or a brujo, or a shaman, or any of those things. It seemed like a natural animal, but an incredibly different kind of one. Sometimes people have gotten confused because Bobby and I used words like magic to describe the experience or what the creature looked like. We were just trying to say that it seemed like a mythical being come to life from a book or a movie. Like one time one or the other of us said that seeing the Dogman was like seeing an animated monster from a movie. We just meant it was like seeing one of those dinosaurs from King Kong moving around when you knew they died out millions of years ago. It was a stunning thing to see, something that looked so much like a werewolf that you could kind of actually call it that. But now you know the way we meant the word. It was not meant literally. There is a famous river that runs through a corner of Winamac. It's famous locally, at least. You might have heard of it. They call it the Tippecanoe River. There was a famous battle along its twists and turns in the early 1800s. Bobby and I used to like to walk its banks and explore the forests surrounding it. We dreamed of finding evidence of ancient battles, but we only ever found old Coke bottles and things like that. Of course, we didn't have a metal detector, so we would just dig randomly whenever we got the impulse. They say you can find stuff as easily using psychic powers as a metal detector if you have those abilities. If that's so, then I don't think either Bobby or I had even the slightest bit of ESP. I'm viewing a map, and I think it's possible that our adventures might have actually taken us out of Winamac at times, as the forest area we explored looks to me to possibly be privately held land just outside of the boundary. But this story happened many years ago, so I'm sure it's well past the statute of limitations for any trespassing we may have accidentally done back then. I do think it was this forest area along the Tippecanoe River just past the southeast edge of Winamac where my childhood friend Bobby and I encountered a living, breathing monster. We were walking along, our heads down, scanning the ground as usual, when we both began to notice a really putrid, rotten smell. It was like every disgusting smell you can think of, all combined together. We were both gagging, and we decided to turn back. I was completely filled with fear as I knew that smelled like death, but I also knew that it had hit us too suddenly for us to have walked up on it. Whatever the source of that smell was, it had just walked up on us. Bobby grabbed my shoulder hard and forced me to look at something he was seeing. When I saw it, both of our lives changed permanently. We both left the world where you can believe authority figures and you think the government or doctors care about what happens to you. We both exited the happy world where experts will explain everything for you on TV. We entered, roughly, and against our will, the world in which the only truth you're ever going to learn is what you happen upon by accident in a forest that you aren't even supposed to be inside of. We were reborn into the realization that Dogman is real. Not only is Dogman real, but he smells just as bad as they say Bigfoot smells. Vegetarian animals don't usually carry this sort of odor on them. You have to be sort of covered in the blood of innocence to achieve this brand of ripeness. A carnivore that stood that tall, they must have sometimes taken down game as large as Bobby and I were back then. We both understood that instinctively as we gazed through the underbrush and saw it. We both laid eyes on the Dogman. It was standing up tall like a human, dangling its arms like a meerkat. I did not actually see it walk, but I did see the eye shine that people talk about. It was scanning the area, no doubt looking for prey. It was not looking in our direction, and we took advantage of that, walking in a different direction away from it, as silently as we could manage. We both wore sneakers anyway, and we were light and small. The ground was wet, and we were able to move with increasing speed until we were nearly out of the woods. I remember that last 50 or 60 feet of dark forest. We could see that we were nearly out, and there was a growing sense of relief that we had made it. Then we heard that Dogman howl, and it was so loud that it scared the daylights out of us. We broke into an open run the rest of the way, running until we saw other people around and felt more certain that the thing wouldn't continue to chase us this far. That was the greatest adventure of my childhood. I saw something impossible and lived to tell the tale. I knew that werewolves were real animals, and it didn't matter how many scientists told me otherwise. I no longer worship so-called experts. I make up my own mind about everything I see and hear. So you might say that the Dogman was a good influence on me in that way. I am no longer naive, and I no longer believe what society tells me to believe. And it's all because of the Winamac werewolf, Memphis monster, Dogman in Tennessee. Dear Scary Stories NYC, my wife and I had a run-in with a tall, gray, bear-like Dogman with a wolf head and glowing yellow eyes in the Meeman Shelby Forest State Park in Tennessee. This was not the first time that the two of us had camped at this location. We find it like a slice of heaven out there, and it's just a wee bitty bit north of Memphis where we live and work. Once in a while, even when you work in an exciting business like the music business, you need a break, and you just want some quiet. We have a cabin by the Mississippi in that park. We have a cabin by the water in that park that we rent when it's available, and each time we go, it's more relaxing than the previous time. That is, until this last time. When we arrived, we were in high spirits. Things have been crazy for us this year, as they've been for everyone watching this show, I'm sure. This was a break from all that, and a break from seriousness, too. We've been looking forward to it for some time, and now the day had arrived. As we unpacked into our cabin, however, I sensed a strangeness to the area. I don't just mean a touchy-feely heebie-jeebie kind of thing. My ears noticed something as I got out of our car. There was a pressure to the air that seemed different. I almost thought I was hearing a very faint, high-pitched whine, but decided at length that the air pressure was creating the feeling of that whine in my ears or nasal cavities somehow. Or maybe the pressure was making my ears create the whining themselves. I kept popping my ears as though I were riding an elevator in a very tall building. I couldn't understand why it felt to me that the air pressure was continually shifting and changing. I didn't mention this to my wife, but I watched her to see if she was experiencing uncomfortability. If it was sub-threshold to her, then I didn't want her to be annoyed by it like I was. She seemed fine, but had a confused expression on her face as she walked around the cabin interior and exterior. Finally, she came up to me and asked me if I smelled gas. I made a joke about the Mexican food we had the night before, but she was serious. She was smelling gas, like the kind that comes out of a stove. So then it was my turn to go around smelling things with a curious expression on my face. I couldn't smell what she was describing, but since we were on the subject of weirdness, I told her what I had been experiencing with my ears. She gave me the oddest expression, then confided in me that she had a gut feeling that what she was smelling was probably what I was hearing. I didn't understand what she meant at the time, but I think basically she was saying that I was perceiving a phenomenon with my ears and she was perceiving it with her nose, but neither of our senses were quite able to grasp or define what it was that was there. It frightened her because it meant that it was something that had never been there before, and it was something just outside of the perceptive abilities of human senses. Those are two good reasons to be put off by something. My wife, at the time, thought it was the predator. I'm half joking, but I'm half serious too. She thought we were sensing an entity of some sort, a living personage that was invisible to us, yet still very real and barely perceptible as a strange odor or a change in the air pressure. At the time, all this was beyond me, but now looking back on it, I think we weren't hearing and sensing the entity itself, but the phenomenon or portal through which the entity came to our world to have its run-in with us. I'll tell you the rest of the story, and you can tell me what you think. So, all afternoon, the weird feelings continued for both of us, and we were each pretty uncomfortable. We went and got someone from the office to come out and check for gas, and when they didn't detect any, we finally finished getting set up. As the skies started turning colors, we decided to go for a walk by the water and watch the sundown. I noticed we were both breathing deeply by the water. I asked my wife if the air smelled better, and she said yes, but she didn't seem happy about it. She seemed preoccupied somehow. My ears weren't popping any longer, and yet somehow I didn't feel better about it. In fact, I felt strangely worried, and I wasn't sure exactly why. I felt a sense of foreboding, and I felt as though we might be in danger, standing there by the water. It was a weird feeling, and I knew it was illogical, but it was getting dark out anyway, so I turned and suggested to my wife that we head back to the cabin. She finished my sentence for me, grabbed me by the hand, and started dragging me back faster than I had been planning to go. At that speed, it was only a minute or two of walking to get back to the cabin, and we had the light on outside to guide us back. Yet somehow, it seemed far, far darker under the canopy of trees than it had when we walked out to the water. Now it seemed as though the entire forest were consumed in dark, mysterious, black shadow. Our cabin was maybe another 100 feet in front of us, but it was on the other side of a thicket of trees, and we were going to have to go left or right to get around the vegetation. In the split second before we made that decision, the moment which you have all been waiting for arrived. From our left, a tall figure crashed through the woods into the path heading toward the thicket. It looked like an old man bear, one grown so tall from having lived 100 years or more. But when I looked to the top of the very tall gray old thing, its head looked like that of a wolf. A wolf with very tall, pointed ears that had tufts of hair on the very top, but a wolf nonetheless. Note, at this point, I didn't hear that whining, and my wife was not noticing her strange smells. Those had all happened earlier, before we saw this immense monster thing. When we saw the monster, the pressure changes and odd odors had been over for some time. My wife gasped because that thing was truly horrifying to look at, and the creature turned toward us. I was still looking it over head to toe, trying to sort out what it was. It was tall, like a bear, and it was walking standing up the way a bear can do. But it was not a bear. It was a shaggy-haired gray wolf. By shaggy hair, I don't think I mean mange. I didn't see any bald spots on the monster, but its fur was uneven in length in various places and seemed quite tangled. By the look on the creature's face, it was used to fighting. It barked at us loudly, baring its teeth and standing up to its full height. But its wide eyes betrayed fear, and the sound of its barking was high-pitched and nervous. This creature was as afraid of us as we were of it, and that was saying a lot. The one kind of animal I'm least interested in being around is one that's frightened. You literally have no idea what a frightened animal might do. If left to its own devices, it might do literally anything. It might take a bad situation and make it far, far worse. The idea popped into my mind that it might lead to a better outcome if I suggested strongly to the creature that it make a decision to follow a path that would serve both it and my family the best. Holding my wife's hand firmly, I took a few steps to my left, pulling her with me. We did not move away from the dogman, but neither did we move toward it. We just moved laterally to our left and to its back. It naturally took a few steps forward and walked around the opposite side of the thicket of trees, moving to our right and further away from us. We continued following it around the thicket, making a point of not approaching the monster when we reached the other side. And when we did, we saw it for the briefest of seconds, charging off into the forest past the next cabin, using all four of its limbs to accelerate. I think that giant dogman was just coming to the water to get a drink and didn't expect to run into us over there. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear of more dogman sightings around Memphis over this summer, because, as my wife and I are now aware, we do have them around here. I've got a hunch that we won't be the last to see the Memphis Monster Dogman in Tennessee.
I shall return. Like last night's triple lupa, I shall return. I'll be back here May 23rd to help host our Memorial Day Military Dogman Stories. All stories alleged to have happened to military service people or veterans. I'm gonna read one of the stories myself. You won't want to miss it. It should prove to be quite memorial.
We've got 3 all-new and very recent Dogman run-ins to tell you about. But I've been told I talk too much, so I'd better jump straight to the exciting news that Mary, Consider the Lilies G, is today's executive producer. Mary had been a member of our paid subscribers club in the past, and she just rejoined us. I hope that means good things are happening in her life, and that they will soon be happening in the lives of everyone listening to this. Except that guy who thinks I talk too much, that is. No, even him too. If you'd like to become a Scary Stories executive producer, like Mary Consider the Lilies G, then just join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or else click the join button on this page. Either way, you get 2 secret uncensored videos containing a combined 9 hours of Dogman stories far too wild to ever be told on this channel. And now, finally time for me to shut up so that today's 3 creepy Dogman stories can start. We've got Dogman in an abandoned mall. We've got Dogman sighted last week in a suburban backyard. And we've got this very unique first story which I call Dogman sang along with my band. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I play in a band, and like a lot of other bands right now, we're hoping to someday be able to play out live again. For now, we each play from home remotely at nights after work, hooking together via the internet. I play drums, record, mix, and produce. My friend G plays bass. A woman we can call H plays guitar or keyboard depending. And we have a singer and sometimes lead guitar player who lives out in the suburbs and has a regular job and a wife and kids. We can call him D. The 3 of us live in Milwaukee, but D lives out in a rich neighborhood he asked me not to name. Well, not rich, but pretty well off. D has a nice private home and a backyard and trees and pet dogs and whatnot. It looks like old shows on TV, not like the other 3 of us, who've always lived in urban environments. G is from Detroit, H is from Brooklyn, and I'm from right here. So we started rehearsing a song that H wrote, and she stopped us in the middle because she said she heard a whining sound during the chorus. We made a few jokes about the lead singer's voice, but then we all quieted down, and we couldn't hear anything, so she checked her equipment, and when she played the guitar part, she couldn't hear the sound that she heard before. We all shrugged our shoulders and went back to playing. This time, the bass player G said he heard some kind of distortion or howling in the background during the chorus as well. I played the recording back, and then we could all hear it. I turned down our tracks one by one until we could tell it was coming from our singer's input out in the hoity-toity countryside. So D checked through all his expensive equipment and he couldn't find the problem anywhere. He sang the chorus once and it seemed to be gone, so we went back to rehearsing. This time, when he hit the chorus, we all noticed the howling sound, but we had agreed this time to just keep playing anyway so that D could try to isolate the issue while it was still happening. He disappeared from view of his webcam and took his mic around with him, looking around his room in his house while he was singing to locate the source of the annoying noise. When he glanced randomly out one of his windows, he did a double take, because there, outside, he found what had been causing all of this. According to D, there was a really tall man, covered in dog hair, howling along with him singing the chorus of that particular song. We all cracked up, thinking that they must have meth heads out in the rich neighborhoods too, but D was kind of shaken up. He asked to take a break, and then we occasionally saw him and his wife running around, sounding really tense. One of his kids was crying at one point. Eventually, he came back to the computer and told us in a shaky voice that he was going to have to bail on the rest of rehearsal, but that he'd explain it to us in time. So we had a rehearsal scheduled for Saturday night, and he called to ask us to make it earlier in the afternoon. We all agreed, and of course when we hooked up again, the number one topic was what exactly had happened last time with the crazy guy in the dog outfit. D got really serious, and he said that wasn't a guy in a costume. He said it was a real animal they have out there that looks like a kind of a werewolf. We all rolled our eyes. We figured he was trying to be funny or something. He was dead serious though, and for the duration of us rehearsing in this way, he only wants to do it during the day. I swear to God, he said he's afraid to sing in that house at night because the Dogman likes to sing along. We don't know if we have the craziest lead singer in the world or the most sane. After all, if he thinks a man-sized werewolf is singing harmony with him, he should ask him to join the band. Think of the publicity it would get us. Seriously though, D is sticking to his new rule. He says that singing in that house at night places his family in danger. You can see in his eyes and hear in his voice that he means it. His wife seems to feel as strongly about this as he does. So either they're both bonkers, or else it's really true that Dogman sang along with my band, Dogman, in my suburban backyard. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I live in Hopatcong, New Jersey, which is a lovely place to live. At least, it was before this crisis situation locked people in their homes and inspired the wild animals to come waltzing on into town. My cousin, who lives 20 minutes away, had a bear walk right down the street she lives on 3 weeks ago, but that was nothing compared to what my family went through the night we saw Dogman in my suburban backyard. Don't get me wrong, it's not like Hopatcong is an urban area. We've got Tomahawk Lake, we've got Lookout Mountain, we've got Modic Park, we've got Lake Hopatcong State Park. It's a beautiful place to visit, and we're surrounded with nature in every single direction. It's just that since people have become afraid to be outside as much, nature seems to have become braver in an equal but inverse manner. I was noticing it, but not really concerned until the Dogman incident happened. That was 5 days ago as I typed this, but I'm still shaken up and uncertain what we should be doing about it. Let me tell you the details, and maybe one of you might have a better idea what I should do than I have. It was bedtime for our 2 kids at our house. My wife was in the second floor bathroom when I heard her shouting something. I was downstairs reading my daughter a bedtime story, and I couldn't make out what her mother was saying. When I exited her room to call upstairs, I was stunned and surprised into emitting a frightened and very unmanly screech. There was someone outside in my backyard, and he appeared to have a fright mask on, a very frightening one. Before I knew what was happening, my daughter was out of her room at my side, and she was screaming even louder than I had, and for far longer. Now, Fright Mask Man turned and stared at both of us, and my daughter screamed louder. The man ran toward us and pressed his mask against the glass of our window, becoming even more horrifying to see than he was already. I picked my daughter up in my arms and prepared to carry her upstairs to what I hoped would be safety. As I headed toward the staircase with her in my arms, I took one last good hard look at the prowler on my property. I wanted to be able to give the police a description of his disguise. What I saw was so surprising to me that I actually paused running for a second or even two, just to stare before heading upstairs. That wasn't a costume. I could see the lips and the tongue of the thing. They looked very real. It looked like a dog and a bear had a kid together that came out bigger than either of its parents. I saw two things that made it clear to me that I was seeing an animal and not a man. It had legs that bent in ways that no man's legs could bend, and it had actual biological features which defined it as a male of whatever species it might turn out to be a part of. I ran upstairs, feeling icy cold fear spreading through my body. The warmth of my crying daughter reminded me that being afraid was not an option. I put her down in my son's room as he complained loudly. I told him to keep the door locked for anyone but me, their mom, or the police, then slammed the door behind me. Inside our bedroom, my wife was shouting on the phone that a werewolf was trying to break into her house. She had become hysterical. I grabbed the phone from her, and she fought me hard, getting nasty about it right from the start. I held the phone close to my mouth as she screamed at me, climbing on my back and trying to hurt me in various ways, some of them successful. I informed the police representative on the other end that we did, in fact, have a burglar on the property and would appreciate if someone could please come out. A burglar? The skeptical woman on the phone asked me as my wife screamed some of the more disgusting things she had learned to say from our son's friends into my ear. Are you sure it's not a monster? I was asked over the phone. Well, he does seem to be wearing a monster mask, and it does appear that he has a dog head mask on. The woman agreed to send someone over, and I got off the line breathing a sigh of relief as my wife gave me a kidney punch. I looked out the window to see where the monster was. I couldn't see it, so I opened the window to have a look around. Leaning out, I craned my neck to see as much of the yard below as I could. My wife stood behind me, screaming abusive insults, trying to goad me into an argument. I ignored her, but to my surprise, the dogman actually walked back around. Looking up at my window, he was trying to see what was making that racket. Maybe to a dogman, that sounds like a love serenade. I told my wife that the dogman was back and moved aside, motioning that she should take a look. She started screaming that I was trying to push her out the window to feed her to the werewolf. By the time the police were there, the creature was gone. They told me they found what looked like dog tracks around, but no human tracks. They said it must have just been a large dog, so if we had a cat, we shouldn't put her out at night. They were very cordial about it, but my wife was dissatisfied with them anyway. She kept telling them that their work was unsatisfactory, and they kept saying they would make a note of her feelings on that score. They were extremely professional, which didn't stop my wife from cursing at them that they were covering up what the government knows about werewolves. She went online and wrote about conspiracy theories as I put the kids back to bed. I would say it was just another night, but the creature, whatever it actually was, scared the living daylights out of me. It behaved in a frightening and deranged manner. It was so large, taller than I am, and a lot faster. It could run circles around any member of my family. If he suddenly wants to claim my house as his turf, that's a very big problem. For the most part, I don't feel as though I have one single workable solution that would make my wife and myself feel that we are doing enough to keep our kids safe. The one thing I have done since this incident was I took part of my stimulus check and I bought some motion-activated security cameras that I'd like to put up around the property. It's taking forever for them to get delivered, but I'm grateful that at least they're on their way. If the dogman does come back, I want some kind of proof that he was here. I don't want him coming around terrifying me and my family if we're not going to get something in return for our suffering. If we became the family that proved once and for all that Dogman exists, I might consider that a fair trade-off for having a Dogman in my suburban backyard. Dogman in the abandoned mall. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I work at a certain mall in a certain eastern state that was once the talk of the town, but is now mostly closed down. We need to keep parts of it open that are connected to public transportation, but almost none of the stores are open now with things the way they are. Even before the crisis hit, the mall had fallen on hard times, and a few of the stores had been closed more than half a year when the virus first hit. Now, there are 2 security guards to guard the entire place at night. We take turns either sitting at the video monitor desk or going around making inspections in person. Even though it should be an easy job, I've always been afraid of one wing of the mall. I don't just mean I've been afraid of it since I got this job. I mean, I've been afraid of that wing since I was a kid. I don't even know why, but the old J.C. Penney in the place freaked me out. The mannequins in there were not like the mannequins I had personally seen anywhere else. It felt haunted, like that old episode of The Twilight Zone where the mannequins talk. Anyway, it's not even J.C. Penney's anymore and the mannequins are long gone, but I always try to get my partner to handle that wing of the mall. The usual guy is cool about it. He usually says yes. But on this one night, when this story took place, I got saddled with the paranoid backup guy. Let's call him the Noid, because he's paranoid and he makes me annoyed. So I asked the Noid to please handle that one wing, and that made him suspicious. Why? Is there something bad in that wing? Do we have rats over there? Why are you trying to push the bad work off on me? What kind of guy are you, anyway? No matter what I said, the Noid became more and more adamant that he would in no way enter that wing of the mall, and that I was going to have to handle it myself. When the time came, he took great glee, setting up in front of the video monitors. I can't wait to see what happens, he said, giggling. He even got himself a snack from one of the machines to help him enjoy the show. I really disliked his sense of certainty that something terrible was about to happen to me. I trudged toward my fate, like a man walking his last mile. I never felt so sad and defeated before in my life, and nothing had even happened to me yet. As I turned the corner toward that long, empty corridor leading to the former J.C. Penney's, I saw something scurry out of my view. I don't mean a mouse or a bug. I mean I saw something large, like a very tall man, and dark, like a gorilla, and it had moved to my right, where I could no longer see it. On top of that, I heard the sound of dog nails on hard linoleum when it moved, or some kind of animal's claws anyway. I froze in place, because the only kind of animal that big, which walks upright, is covered in fur, and has claws for toenails, is a bear. There had to be at least one bear that somehow got into the mall. That also had to mean that there was an opening to outside, somewhere in the complex, and that who knows how many other animals, or even people, might be inside the building. I radioed in and told all this to my partner, who just giggled on the other end. "You were going to send me down there," he said, laughing. "You thought I was stupid." I apologized and asked him to please put in a call to the police. I was unarmed, and if anything happened, it's our job to call the police. The Noid refused. He wanted me to go closer and tell him for sure what kind of animal was in the building. We argued about it, but the Noid is annoying. The Noid knows how to use guilt, too. The Noid is manipulative, and he manipulated me until I finally gave up and agreed to walk a bit further down the hall, trying to get a second look at whatever that figure was that I had caught such a brief glimpse of. I walked as quietly as I could, but each step echoed. I wondered why I wasn't allowed to wear sneakers, because shoes on a hard floor in an empty building are like a bell around a cat's neck. I tried to listen between the echoes to hear if anyone or anything else was walking around in there. I continued to hear nothing. There was a corner on my right. I was going to check that. And then, no matter what the Noid said, I was beating it back to the command station. I could call the cops myself if I needed to. Having made up my mind as to how I was going to proceed, I turned that corner to my right to see what was back there. The barking was so loud that I slipped and fell backward, landing on my butt. I saw the dog running toward me, but somehow it was very far up in the air. It also somehow had hands, which reached out toward me. I got up and ran before I understood what I was running from. There was a black dog in the building, but it was a dog with hands. Clawed hands. We ran down that slippery hallway, sliding in this direction and that. Neither my shoes nor his claws ever succeeding in gaining any traction on that overly waxed and shiny surface. I somehow tumbled into an elevator, while the dog-headed bear man slid into a wall. I went back to the command center. I asked my worthless partner which parts of that just got recorded on video. He asked, "Which parts of what?" None of it had happened in front of any of the security cameras. That was the final straw for me. I changed out of my uniform. I handed in my resignation. I knew that if I didn't, I was going to be the one who had to find out where the dogman had gotten into the building. I knew that was not going to be the end of the story. I just told the Noid to call the cops and to call animal control. And then I left. I recognize that everything that's going on in the world right now is very serious, and I recognize it's not my place to criticize those trying to keep us all safe. I hope for the sake of all of us that they're weighing the dangers that come with abandoning huge spaces like malls for such long periods of time. We have to fix this problem soon so that we can start unabandoning these places. Otherwise, that won't be the last time someone like me has to deal with Dogman in the abandoned mall. We've got a real treat coming up next for you guys. Not one, but two different stories about the Louisiana Dogman. Or are they about the Lougarou? I'm curious what you think. But before we get to that, I've got a really fun announcement. The executive producer of these next two stories is the undying and legendary Jeff Underhill. What a thrill. Jeff Underhill. Totally chill. Jeff Underhill. He brings the skills. Jeff Underhill. I'll always shill for Jeff Underhill. Thanks, Jeff. You know, Jeff joined us by clicking that join link under the video screen on YouTube. Hopefully he's noticed the two members-only community posts, in which I've given him and the others links to 9 hours of secret, uncensored Dogman stories. You can also join us by signing up to our PayPal club at peterbernard.com. Choose whatever level you'd like to donate at, and whatever price you can afford. We send you the links to all the videos, plus a new scary, secret, uncensored story each Sunday. Or Monday if the episode takes too long to render. You know how it can get. Speaking of how it can get, it's time for us to be getting on to this week's episode. Thanks again, Jeff Underhill. We couldn't do it without you, and nice people like you. You know, recently, nice people on the community page requested that we do Lougarou stories. For both of you who don't already know, that's a name that werewolves are called in Louisiana. Well, that's the short definition. I have 2 Dogman stories that took place in or near New Orleans on this show. I don't know if these were werewolves or dogmen or what. It doesn't really come out in either story, so I hope these are close enough to your request. They could very well have been dogmen or werewolves as far as I can tell. You decide for yourself. The second story involves seeing a dog-headed creature inside the swamp itself. But this first one alleges a sighting that took place in a far more everyday location. And that's why we call this one the Werewolf of Walmart. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a story for you that's the scariest thing that ever happened to me. When people write to you talking about how terrifying the Dogman is when you encounter it, you should believe what they are saying. I cannot put into words how frightened I was. It was an unnatural kind of fear. It was a lot scarier than encountering a bear or a bobcat, but I can't tell you why. Either of those animals can take you down and finish you off, but with the Dogman, you're not just encountering an animal. You're encountering something that shouldn't be there. You're having a run-in with somebody that lives inside of bad dreams. Imagine the most afraid you've ever felt. Now imagine that turned up to 11. It's still nothing like what it feels like to realize you're within striking range of a loup-garou in New Orleans, Louisiana. You know, New Orleans is a pretty magical place. I mean that in the nicest way possible, and also in the scariest way possible. It can charm the pants off you 1 second, then scare the pants off you before you've even had time to put them back on. We have supernatural terrors here, sure, but we've also got snakes and gators and crime and that sort of down-to-earth type of horror. We've got at least 3 magic shops that I can think of off the top of my head. They aren't open right now due to the crisis, I don't think, but I mean to say that these are magical magic shops. They aren't selling you TV magic cards to fool your friends. They sell books and items for people looking to do magic in a more real sense. Whether you believe in that or not is up to you, but it's a real thing to a lot of people who live around here. We've also got our own weird culture and art, entirely different from anywhere else in the world. The Museum of Death is here. Marie Laveau's House of Voodoo is here. The American Drugstore was invented here too, and we have a museum that they made out of the home of America's first licensed pharmacist. There's absolutely no place in the world more unique than New Orleans. I've been to New York, Portland, and Austin, and I admit all 3 can sometimes rise to New Orleans' level of strangeness. They can be equally as unique, but no place in America could be more unique than the Big Easy. Now that I've written all of that, and believe me, it took a while to compose, I am now going to throw it out the window when I tell you that I saw a Dogman in New Orleans. But I saw it in the most prosaic and mundane place possible. The one location here that is exactly the same as it is in every single other part of the country. I saw Dogman in the Walmart parking lot. If that makes you laugh, then go ahead and get it out of your system. Once you're done, unpause the video and I'll continue. Feel better? Good. Now I'm going to tell you why this story wasn't funny at all. Not when it happened to me, at least. It was 11 o'clock at night, and I was in the parking lot at Walmart. Why was I there? Good question. I was there to meet a guy that I buy stuff from on eBay. Not a stranger, really. We've been meeting for 9 or 10 years now. Sometimes he sends me the things I buy UPS, and other times we'll meet. So he can save postage and I can get it sooner since we're close by. Also, we have a mutual interest in the stuff that he sells and that I buy, and we like to sometimes hang out and get a beer or something and chat. This time, I had my medical face mask hanging down on my chin, ready to pull up when he arrived. We were likely going to mainly just do the exchange this time, and that's how the parking lot there ended up being our chosen meeting spot. I'm talking about the Walmart Supercenter in New Orleans. I took these pictures off of Google to show you where it happened. Now remember, it was at night, and it was a lot less crowded. I know it doesn't look scary during the day, but imagine the lot nearly empty, and it's dark, and you're completely alone. Then it's pretty creepy, believe me. You don't even need a dogman to get scared there if you're alone at night. That's because nobody is supposed to be there alone at that time, especially not with the stuff going on that's happening right now with the health situation and whatnot. I guess the place closes at 10 maybe, because I kept seeing workers leaving, walking to their cars, all giving me strange looks. I probably seemed like I was there to make a drug deal or something. I was there to pick up goods, but they were legal goods, and I had paid online already using PayPal. So my man was very late. It was 11:20 and getting cold out. I texted him, and he texted back something in Taiwanese that seemed to be telling me that he was driving and couldn't text while driving. At least I knew he was still on his way, but I was getting chilled, and I decided to walk back to my car to warm up a bit. I had parked near the entrance, all the way on the other side of the lot. It's a long story. I had thought that was where we should meet. After I got there, he texted me to say to meet under the Walmart logo. So, instead of getting back in my car and driving it over, I just walked across the lot. I thought he was going to be there any minute when I did that, and it had seemed to make sense at the time. Now, it was around a half hour later, and I felt like security was going to kick me out soon. I walked all the way across, back to my vehicle, my head buried in my phone, as I texted my eBay friend to tell him where I was moving myself to. The same exact moment that I hit send on that text, I heard a most unwelcome sound from the area I had parked my car in. Looking up, I saw something I never expected to see outside of a movie or a TV show. I saw a loup-garou. I saw a standing dog, built big and bulky like a warrior dog, a bear dog. It was standing too close to my car for me to take another step forward. It was looking at me and making unhappiness noises, and I felt my manhood shrivel. I never felt so outmatched in my entire life. This guy was bigger than me, totally pumped, but also quite handsome. I could imagine it ending my life, and then my wife bringing it home because it was such a gorgeous animal. Yeah, come to think of it, she would definitely have thrown me over for that dogman or a werewolf or whatever he was. He reminded me of a husky dog in the face, and a raccoon in its hand-like claws. The back legs, or the only appendages it used as legs, were very much like a taller version of normal canine legs, but also bulked out like its top half. I remember its legs reminded me of Scooby-Doo. They were seriously like exaggerated cartoon versions of a dog or a wolf's back legs. The creature stood tall and steady and seemed rock solid. If a car ran into that beast, I'm not sure which would have given way first. This was like a superhero version of a dog, or maybe a caveman version. The way it was glaring at me through its inexplicably bright eyes, I would say it was the nightmare version of a dog. Have you ever wanted to run so badly that you could scream, but been unable to make your feet move? I actually really was frozen to the spot, staring like a deer caught in the headlights. I couldn't advance, and I was afraid to turn my back on the thing to retreat. All I could do was vacillate. I couldn't make up my mind what else to do except to continue to not make a decision. Eventually, the loup-garou in the parking lot, he decided for me. He started barking at me angrily, leaning down to my level. He walked toward me with a forceful and decisive kind of gait. Apparently he had made up his mind what to do, and the decision was not a good one for me personally. I dropped to my knees and I wept as I prepared to meet my maker. Car lights forced my eyes open, and my eBay friend pulled his car up alongside me. He rolled down his window and asked me if we were here to pray. The dogman was long gone. He had never even seen it. He must have scared the monster off as he pulled into the lot. I started to tell him emotionally what happened, but he just looked at me like I was crazy. I got my stuff from him, and I drove home. But I was crying most of the way, wiping tears from my eyes. If my eBay seller hadn't shown up at just that moment, I doubt I would have ever been able to drive home again. Everything is brighter and fresher and more extreme to me since this happened. Every second I'm alive is a blessing. It's borrowed time. Every breath I take is the greatest gift in the world. But sometimes you don't realize that until you almost take your last breath because of something horrible, like the dogman or the loup-garou. I admit, the impression this thing left was damn impressive. If someone somehow was able to prove that it is actually from another planet or dimension or something, I wouldn't be all that surprised. If you think it's supernatural or paranormal, I'm not going to argue with you. But if you look at a map of New Orleans and then you pull back out of it and look at the areas around the city, you'll see that it's entirely surrounded either by water or forests or swamps or bayous. There's a whole lot of fairly pristine natural land encircling that magical place, so much so that there's no way science could possibly be certain they know every species living there. They even have multiple wildlife management areas so that they can study what they understand and learn more about what they don't. If we're going to use Occam's razor, I'd have to say that the evidence seems to indicate that the most likely solution is that this is some kind of currently unclassified, but very real and biological animal. I could be wrong. After all, if it is an animal, then why haven't we caught one by now? Why are there none in zoos or even stuffed in museums? Are they animals as intelligent or more intelligent than humans? Do they hide themselves from us because they see us as a threat or because they see us as prey? Does mainstream society deny their existence because of lack of evidence? Or does mainstream society deny their existence out of fear because of what their existence implies? That we are not on top of the food chain. Maybe it's all still too recent for me to be making any sense talking about. I wake up in the night thinking the creature is in the room with me, or that it's outside my room stalking me. I sometimes sit staring out the windows at night, expecting to see it again. Last night, I couldn't get up the nerve to look out. I really felt like it was going to be there, looking back at me, with those bright, shining eyes that made my eyes hurt to look at it. I wish I could go away for a while, to regroup, But there's no way I can travel right now. All I can do is sit here, asking myself question after question after question about the Werewolf of Walmart, Dogman in the Louisiana swamp. Dear Scary Stories NYC. Ever since I was very young, my grandma would tell me stories about the loup-garou and also the booger man. She said they were kings of the bayou and the swamp. I grew up with a fear of the werewolf or dogman, as I had a cousin who told me he saw one just east of St. Bernard on Route 300. He said it was walking out of the woods on its hind legs carrying something. I asked him what, and he told me he put his foot down on the gas pedal and never looked back, so he couldn't tell me. The look on his face meant a lot more to me than a million stories from my grandma. She was telling me those stories to make me behave. My cousin was telling me because he was almost scared to death by what he saw. And what he saw was a rougarou, a lougarou, a Louisiana dogman, a North American upright walking canine, or something closely resembling one of the above. Back, I guess, in March, I took a day off to walk in nature. I ended up at a location wherein I not only saw, but got charged at by a bulldog man in broad daylight. That trail in the park where it happened was closed within 2 days, although the official reasoning has nothing to do with the dog man. I'm going to tell you about what happened to me, and you can decide for yourself why that trail was closed, even though most of the rest of the parks around there are remaining open. I looked up the actual name of where I was, and it's the Jean Lafitte National Historical Park and Preserve. They have these wooden boardwalks through the swamps there that allow you to witness nature without getting wet or wrecking it too badly. If you're lucky, you can see all manner of wildlife on a trip to this preserve. If you're unlucky, you may find yourself face to snout with a genuine New Orleans lougarou, or possibly a Louisiana dogman. There's a lot of debate locally, at least among the people I talk to, about whether those two things are the same, similar, or completely unrelated to each other. It depends who you ask, basically. New Orleans is traditionally a place where individuals are encouraged to think for themselves, and each magical worldview can be vastly different than the next one. Before you can even have a conversation about some of these subjects down here, you need to first set down signposts for each other. You must agree on some definitions at least before extrapolating your concepts into new visions, at least if you want to be understood. Not everyone cares if anyone else understands them, of course, and that's especially true down here in New Orleans. So, let's cut straight to the chase. I was alone. I was the only person in that area of the park. Suddenly, I noticed another man. He was not on the trail, though. He was out there in the swamp, in the water itself. Not only was he not allowed to be there, but he was placing himself in great danger. I opened my mouth to call him, and then halted, as I was taken aback by the fellow's outward appearance. At first I thought it was covered in mud, but I quickly ruled that out, as I squinted into the glare of the sun, reflecting from the swamp water in fractions and slivers of light, all around the tall grass growing from it. It was quite disorienting, but I became certain that the gentleman was wearing some kind of a Halloween costume. He was either dressed as a giant canine, or perhaps a werewolf. It was hard to tell. The head mask on him looked astonishingly accurate and alive. The way the lips would pull back to reveal teeth too large and long to possibly be real was absolutely indistinguishable from the real thing. I saw him wading through the water up to his navel. I wondered how deep that water was. It was so hard to judge the height of the man, or animal. I called to him to get out of there. Leeches and even gators are known to lurk in those swamps and bayous near New Orleans. Snakes, too, some of them very dangerous. I implored him to stop being a fool. The Jean Lafitte National Historical Park and Preserve was no place to be joking around or cosplaying, especially not waist deep in waters that I'm positive it's very unhealthy to be wading in. At first, I couldn't even get the guy's attention. He seemed to be watching the water, or maybe watching something in the water. I shouted one more time, and then he heard me. As soon as he did, he and I locked eyes. And as soon as we locked eyes, I regretted having drawn his attention my way. Those eyes I was looking into were not human. They didn't look like animal eyes either, at least not exactly. The figure I thought was a crazy cosplayer was too tall, too inhuman to be human. It began growling a snarling kind of sound as it raced forward in the water, creating big waves on either side of it as it charged toward the wooden boardwalk I was standing on. I turned and ran down the steps there, barely missing running directly into a middle-aged couple. They asked me what I was running from, and turning around in all directions, I couldn't see anything to point to. It seemed as though the Lougarou or Dogman or whatever that was had just left as quickly and mysteriously as he had arrived. Like I said, the trails in that park are all closed down now. Allegedly, it's for the obvious reason. I'm not going to say it isn't, because how would I know? I'm not an expert. But the one thing I do know is the Lougarou, or the New Orleans Dogman, it still lives to this day in the swamps and the bayous of Louisiana. I hope you got through the weekend okay. For those of you who live in places where the bars just reopened, I hope your hangovers aren't too fierce. And for the rest of us, I hope we can go out to our favorite cool places very soon. Speaking of cool places, the executive producer for this episode is from my second favorite city in the world, Boston. In fact, her online name is Cheryl from Boston. Cheryl, I have composed this rhyme for thee. Cheryl from Boston, a name we get lost in, 1,000,000 times better than Cheryl from Austin. Without Ms. C. Boston, our life was exhausting, and nothing else rhymes. With Cheryl from Boston, thank you very much, Ms. CB. We couldn't do this show without you and our other wonderful executive producers. If you out there would like to be as epic and culturally important as Cheryl from Boston, just join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or do it the way Cheryl did it by clicking the join button beneath this video on YouTube. Either way, you get links to over 9 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories far too wild to run on this channel, plus a new uncensored story each week for executive producers only. Why, just yesterday we ran a story about a guy who claims to have eaten the meat of a dogman. I mean, I can't even tell you the title here on this channel. What I can tell you is that if you look up on a search engine to find out what kind of an animal has yellow or orange eye shine, it's likely going to tell you that you're seeing an owl. It's probably not going to tell you that you're seeing what the guy who sent us this next story allegedly saw. I'll give you a hint. It wasn't a feathered creature. What it was the Dogman in the tree. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a story for you about how I thought I was seeing one thing, but I was actually seeing something quite different. It's about how I innocently, stupidly, and naively walked right up to a dogman. I have lived in my current house since the early 1990s when my wife and I bought it. When we first moved in, the house next door was occupied by an elderly lady. After she passed on, it was empty for 21 straight years. Since my wife left me 9 years ago, I had become used to a very quiet lifestyle. Then, late last year, a young childless couple moved in just in time to have an endless and loud Christmas celebration. I couldn't hear it in the house, but I could hear it out back during the time I used to like to commune with the night sky and the trees blowing in the wind. Once the holidays were past, both of them resumed their day jobs, and it would really only get noisy one night or the other on the weekend when they would entertain friends. Nothing they were doing was out of line, but I missed my now defunct quiet life. When this virus thing started, the company they both apparently work for seems to have given them computers and told them to work from home. Now I get to listen to loud music that tells me when they've gotten up, different loud music that means they are exercising, then loud garbage TV fake news through the day until it's quitting time, and then the loud music begins again. I'm adapting to a new lifestyle of staying indoors. They say it's healthier for us old folk anyway. On this night, when our story took place, I missed the stars and nature so much that I downloaded a nature sounds white noise audio file, then played it at max volume on my earbuds as I stood out back trying to enjoy the night over the sound of the loud partying going on in my neighbor's backyard. I try very hard not to be unhappy with that young couple. They're just living their lives. I was probably louder than they are when I was their age. They smile and are friendly to me, and I'd rather keep the loud people on my side than start a war with them. They usually do lower it after 10 and then go inside by 11 or 12, so it's not like they're completely out of control, and they are trying to keep it within limits. I have no right to be annoyed, but I sure will be happy when they go back to working in offices and I can get some quiet, at least sometimes. Something distracted me in the forest past our yard. I at first thought I was seeing a light in the woods, but upon closer inspection, it seemed to be a yellowish eye shine. I looked it up on my phone and was told that it would most likely be an owl that I was seeing. It seemed so far off the ground I figured the owl must be on a fairly high branch. My curiosity aroused, I walked across my lawn and right on into the extremely dark woods, but no matter how dark it got in there, I could still see that bright yellowish-orange eye shine off in the distance, and I wanted to keep going until I either saw the owl or lost sight of the eye shine. Keeping my focus on the location of the glowing eyes, I slipped past trees and foliage and got closer and closer to where the bird must have been, yet I still had not reached it. I felt as though the deeper I got into the forest, the further back the owl seemed to be. It was so hard to tell that it would be this far in. That eye shine must be very bright to have seemed so near at my back door, yet no closer now that I was deeper into the woods than I'd ever gone before, at least at night. Yet I was driven, and I just kept on going. The sounds of nature playing on my phone blasting in my ears. I entered a clearing which, although still very dark, was lit by the moon and the stars and was therefore far brighter than it had been under the tree canopy. I could now see the owner of those glowing eyes. They were indeed sitting on a branch in a tree as I had presumed. They were not, however, in the skull of an owl or any other kind of bird. They were in the head of a creature that appeared distinctly dog-like. The dog thing jumped off of the branch it had been on and landed on the ground. It seemed much larger, almost as though it had grown down to the ground more than jumped down. Its tall body was shaped more like a man's than a dog's, and it was bipedal from the moment it was ground level. I never saw it go down on all fours. It was not a dog. It was a dog man. It didn't make sense to me that it could have been that size when it was on that branch, as its head, as it stood there bipedally, was now above the level of the branch it had appeared to be sitting on. Reality itself seemed all warped and wonky, and I felt both a deep, amplified kind of fear and a sort of existential dread that I'd never felt before, but haven't shaken completely since. I ran. The dogman did too. I remember feeling as though my eyes could no longer blink, that I was searching both my mind and the darkness for a way out of this. One part of me was convinced it was over, and I was about to become prey to the dogman, and another part of me felt as though I was forgetting something. A random branch tore my earbuds out of my ears, and at once I heard the sounds of my neighbors' loud and annoying partying. It was coming directly from my left, and therefore was far closer to me than my own empty and quiet backyard would have been. I ran for my neighbor's yard, and by the looks on their faces when I arrived, I must have given both of them quite a shock. In fact, they looked so surprised, I was concerned they were seeing the dogman behind me. I remember talking to the neighbors politely, but looking over my shoulder back toward the woods at the same time. I couldn't help but continue to wonder if that giant beast was going to crash through into the party. Other than my neighbors now wondering if I have dementia, I came out of the incident unscathed. But I did learn something from all this, something that you might not find on a search engine. If you see yellowish orange eye shine in the night, do not, and I repeat, do not assume that it is an owl, because you might be looking at the dogman in the tree. Our habituated Bigfoot turned out to be a dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a strange tale for you from quite some time ago, back in the mid-20th century. It's a story about a time long past and a culture far different from ours today. We didn't have a name for the monstrous creature that haunted and tormented us when we thought it was what is now called Bigfoot. We were left even further in the dark for terminology when we were forced to accept that the creature harassing us was what we now colloquially referred to as Dogman. I was still young back then, living in Pennsylvania with my parents and 3 older sisters. My father worked in a factory, but he was able to pay our bills, and we had a private home at the edge of town. Mom raised the kids and made Dad's meals, which was the fashion back in those days. We're talking like 1962, 1963 here. The Beatles hadn't come to America yet, but they were starting to get big in England. Twilight Zone with Rod Serling was still coming on TV with new episodes. It was technically the 1960s, but it was still the early button-down black and white 60s. There was no tie-dye yet, and the hippies all had shorter hair and were usually called beatniks. And another thing, we didn't yet know of the terms Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I'm not saying they didn't exist, but we hadn't heard them yet over in PA, and we most definitely had not heard the word habituated. Nevertheless, we felt that we had an ape-like monster man living in the woods behind our home, and we felt that he was hostile to our presence there. In short, we thought we were living with a habituated, yet very hostile, Bigfoot, even if we didn't have the words to express that concept yet. We didn't always think that. It was a belief that developed over time. At first, we actually thought we were being bothered by neighbor kids, but we could never catch sight of them to be certain. We had different weird things that would happen. Sometimes we would be sitting out in the backyard having a fun time together into the night. Someone would begin pelting us with acorns or pebbles or something. That would always lead to us going inside, because even when we would shine our high-powered flashlight into the woods around us, we couldn't see anyone there. We had a cousin from Arkansas who visited us and experienced that activity. He told us that it was one or more swamp boogers. He also told us that we didn't want to mess with them. He had never seen one of them himself, but he had a couple of friends who had, and he told us they were everything bad and nothing good. He said having swamp boogers on your property was worse than having rats and 10 times as hard to get rid of. Now, the general definition of a swamp booger, as our cousin explained it back then, would be about the same thing as what we call a Bigfoot now, although they were much shorter than the modern image of the Sasquatch. He told us about what they had down his way, which were man-sized, hairy, caveman-like creatures. They could be anywhere from 5.5 to 6.5 feet tall, and they looked like they were half ape and half human. A number of the anecdotes he related to us involved creatures who were actually shorter than the people who encountered them. They were always so utterly horrible to see, though, and so foul-smelling from their lives in the swamps, that they instilled utter fear in the people who encountered them. They were said to be far stronger than humans, which was another reason to avoid contact with even the shorter members of the species. Sometimes they appeared as humanoid apes, and other times they appeared as ape-like humans, but they always looked like a really scary, unholy, terrifying to think about mix of us with them. We put up a tight mosquito screen fence 10 feet tall up on the side of the forest closest to where we like to hang out at night, not to keep out the mosquitoes, but to keep out the acorns or pebbles. What happened then was that the pebbles would bounce off the very tops of our heads. Somehow, whoever was doing it would throw them way high over our mosquito netting fence and still aim them so well that he'd annoy us enough to get us to go inside, even with that tall fence in place. I remember the activity escalating as we would hear the house being thumped in the middle of the night. I don't know what that was, but it sounded like someone hitting the house or running into it maybe. Very bizarre, my memories of that. It was frightening because it felt like a threat, but it was also frightening because it kind of didn't make any sense at all. In fact, it would make less sense the more I would think about it, and that would make me more and more frightened. It reached the point where I would be too afraid to leave my bed at night once I got into it. If I had to go, it was going to have to wait till the sun was up. I was visualizing those 6-foot-tall hairy cavemen outside the house, looking in every window, and I just wanted to stay up on the second floor and hope they didn't figure out any way to get inside. For a long time, maybe years, we all referred to any strange activity near the house as the work of the booger. That was the name for our boogeyman, and we visualized him looking like what now might be called the Boggy Creek Monster. Then, one Sunday night, all 6 of us were driving home after visiting some family, and we saw something that would entirely change our idea of what was haunting our property. We were driving on State Route 1019, getting close to our home. We came to a curve in the road, and my father had to hit the brakes and squeal to a skidding halt as the biggest living thing I've ever seen outside of a circus or zoo walked right over the guardrail on the right like stepping over an anthill, then raced across the road on its hind legs. It was twice the size of what our cousin told us a swamp booger looked like, and it looked totally different. It had legs like a bird or something. Not really like a bird, but maybe a furry dinosaur. The legs bent like an animal's, not like a human being's legs bend or move. But it was up on the hind legs like how an ostrich or other 2-legged bird would be. It wasn't down on all fours. The head was nothing like a human or a chimp, and it didn't look like a gross mix of human and animal. It had a dog or maybe wolf-like head that looked very natural and, in fact, impressive is probably the best word for this creature. The thing was large and massive, but also graceful and athletic. It was entirely covered in dark fur, or at least it appeared dark in that lighting. At points, I could see the infamous eye shine, but at other points I could not. It was across the street in just a step or two, and scrambled up the 15 or 20-foot left wall of the road up to the next level where the other lane is. I imagined I heard more tires screeching up there as my father gunned his motor and got us angrily back on our track. The entire incident might have taken 15 or 20 seconds max. My mother and all of us kids were freaking out about what had just happened, but My father was using it as a reason to be annoyed. After some length, he shouted at us that it was just a stupid animal, and we're lucky we didn't run into it. My father could have been in the middle of a rain of frogs, and he would only notice the aspects of it which were inconveniencing him. If he were abducted by aliens, he would complain to them that they were making him late for his next appointment. So, we almost ran into an 8 or 9 foot tall, hairy, dog-headed swamp booger with backward legs. And my father's response was, "Almost doesn't count. Now shut up so I can drive." From then on, when we'd have acorns tossed at us in the backyard, or feel the house being bumped in the middle of the night, we no longer imagined that it was some kind of ape man doing it. We knew that the creature haunting our part of the world had a dog head on top, and that it was far larger than an Arkansas swamp booger. In fact, I think we may have made an early sighting of the Westmoreland Dogman. I mean, we were heading home to Wilpin, which is in Westmoreland County, just to the southeast of Pittsburgh. But if it wasn't the Westmoreland Dogman, then maybe it was the Wilpin Werewolf, because our habituated Bigfoot turned out to be a dogman.
I shall return. Like last night's triple lupa, I shall return. I'll be back here May 23rd to help host our Memorial Day Military Dogman Stories. All stories alleged to have happened to military service people or veterans. I'm going to read one of the stories myself. You won't want to miss it. It should prove to be quite memorial.
And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
Come back for more scary stories.